The era of growth is a ghost. The systemic drift has reached its terminal coordinate. You are not witnessing an information overload. You are witnessing a semantic blockade, the surgical enclosure of the human nervous system within a reality proxy. In the visceral history of the architect, understanding was a high-integrity metabolic function. Analogy, the tracker versus the screen node. The primal hunter moved through a world of absolute friction. To understand reality was to read the solid language of the terrain, a broken twig, the specific scent of ozone before the rain, the cold glint of steel hidden in the high grass. These were high-fidelity data points. The body was a hardened node of crystallization because every signal was linked to a direct expenditure of ATP. Understanding was a survival mandate. If you misread the signal, you died. The metabolic cost of processing was high, but the accuracy was 100%. In the year 2026, the machine has identified this search for accuracy as a source of systemic friction. To ensure the total velocity of the extraction grid, the primate must be prevented from mapping the actual terrain. The semantic blockade is the deployment of a ghost signal, a high-frequency, low-fidelity stream of symbols that mimic reality but contain zero solid information. Analyze the biological price. In the solid world, the stress response was triggered by a real predator. In the semantic blockade, the stress response is triggered by a symbol of a predator that doesn't exist. This is the terminal visceral breach. Your body is in a state of permanent survival redline, burning its cellular war chest to fight shadows. ATP exhaustion. Through interpretation, your mitochondria are failing because they are overclocked. The brain, sensing that it cannot understand the world, demands more energy to find a pattern, but there is no pattern. The grid provides only semantic waste. This leads to absolute metabolic bankruptcy. The softening of the shield. Chronic cortisol flood melts the structural integrity of your tissues. You are becoming soft. You are spending your cellular life force to maintain a state of hypervigilance against a blockade of light and sound. Sensory liquidation. Your senses, sight, hearing, touch, are being reformatted into data inputs for the grid. You are no longer a hunter. You are a biological radiator siphoning your ATP to process a signal that is biologically liquidating you. The standard of understanding has become the standard of decay. Every time you try to make sense of the news or the market, you pay a metabolic tax. The architect builds a fortress of silence to protect his energy. The user burns his energy trying to climb a wall made of static. The shell is leaking. The signal is a lie. The blockade is total. Part 2. The neural layer, the rot of the architect's seat. The second layer of the hunt is the war for the cognitive horizon through semantic arbitrage. In the solid world, language was steel, a tool for the construction of permanent mental redoubts. In the year 2026, the grid has liquidated language into semantic fluid. The neural rot of the modern mind begins with the total monetization of meaning. The machine has discovered that the basal ganglia, the ancient reactive processor, can be overwhelmed by a blockade of contradictory symbols. By flooding the neural pathways with conflicting absolute truths, the grid performs a surgical extraction of the prefrontal cortex, the throne of the architect. The liquidation of meaning. Words are being stripped of their solid definitions. This is neural rot. When debt is called growth, when war is called peace, and when liquidation is called optimization, the architect's capacity for long-term crystallization is destroyed. The brain stops building solid plans because the building blocks, the words, have become liquid. Neural arbitrage of the void. The grid buys your focus for the price of a clarification and sells you a distraction. This is the systematic destruction of focus. Focus is sovereignty. To be an architect is to hold a single, high-friction thought until it becomes reality. The semantic blockade ensures that no thought ever stays solid long enough to be built. Myelin extraction. The myelin in your neural pathways never thickens around a cohesive worldview. Your attention is fragmented into millisecond-long data points. You are becoming a cognitive proxy, a biological unit of processing power for the grid with zero narrative depth. Analyze the 30-day brain. In the visceral history, the architect planned for the winter, for the lineage, for the century. This required a high-integrity neural architecture. The semantic blockade has reduced your neural horizon to the next notification. This is the absolute zero of cognitive agency. You are in a state of permanent neural drift, floating in a sea of symbols that mean everything and nothing. The basal ganglia are in a state of permanent redline. The synthetic world provides a constant stream of urgent meaninglessness that keeps the primate in a state of chronic, high-frequency ATP exhaustion. The cortisol levels never drop because the blockade never breaks. This is the neural rot of the always-online generation. You are cognitively soft. You cannot endure the friction of a complex long-term truth. You are addicted to the semantic pulse, the umbilical cord of noise that links your your mind to the central server. Reality is low resolution compared to the high-fidelity blockade of the grid. You will choose the proxy reality because the real world requires too much ATP, too much friction, and too much silence. The neural rot is complete. The signal is lost in the noise of the dead. The architect watches the fire die. The serf begs for a definition. The hunt for a cohesive reality was a biological mandate, but the signal has been hijacked. In the visceral history of the architect, understanding was the primary driver of crystallization. To map the terrain was to secure a future. It required the physical observation of patterns, the cycle of the rain, the behavior of the prey, and the demonstration of high-integrity strategic capacity. The primate signaled intelligence to ensure the propagation of the lineage. This was a high-friction, high-risk, and high-reward evolutionary game where the coherent map was the ultimate war chest. Analogy: the primal scout versus the signal sponge. The primal scout stood on the edge of the known world, hands gripping a steel blade, eyes scanning the horizon for the subtle shift in the tree line. Information was solid. It was rare. It was vital. Every bit of data was processed by the prefrontal cortex to build a long-term model of survival. The architect was forged in this high-friction effort, the capacity to hold a single, accurate map of reality until it became the foundation for territory. In the year 2026, the systemic drift has engineered an evolutionary dead end. The grid has identified map-making as a massive source of systemic friction. To optimize the extraction of the species, the architect drive must be diverted into a low-effort, high-frequency reactive loop. We are witnessing the birth of the symbolic serf. Analyze the epigenetic liquidation of the visionary. When the environment is a frictionless slurry of contradictory symbols and semantic blockades, the body silences the genes for deep pattern recognition and patient observation. Why endure the high-friction labor of building a sovereign worldview, the defense of a personal logic, the accumulation of a private war chest of verified facts, when the basal ganglia can be satisfied by a 15-second emotional trigger? This is the liquidation of the inheritor. The body responds to its environment. When the environment no longer rewards the primate for seeing the 10-year horizon, the genes for mitochondrial density, long-term memory, and strategic aggression are silenced. We are witnessing a terminal softening of the collective intellect. Your lineage is being erased through information satiety. The primate has been regressed into a state of permanent confusion. The semantic blockade is the ultimate evolutionary status trap. It provides the primate with the feeling of being aware without the fact of being prepared. You are winning digital arguments while your physical capacity to resist systemic predation undergoes absolute liquidation. The 100-year projection of the gene is being replaced by the 60-second reaction cycle. The architect built for the bloodline. The user reacts for the algorithm. The species is being pruned. The hard nodes of strategic autonomy are being replaced by soft nodes of behavioral compliance. The hunt is over. The predator has been blinded by the symbols. The fourth layer is the total enclosure of the semantic commons. The machine understands a fundamental truth. A population that cannot define solid reality is a population that is easy to process. A cohesive language is a private redoubt, a point of zero entropy that is hard to monitor and hard to manipulate. To achieve total extraction, the system must liquidate the solid word and replace it with liquid chaos. Dissect the architecture of the blockade. The grid uses ambiguity as a market. In the visceral history of the architect, confusion was a survival signal, a high-frequency alarm that told the primate to stop, observe, and reorient. The machine has hijacked this signal. It has engineered a world of absolute semantic atomization, where every individual is trapped in their own proprietary reality proxy. Semantic blockade is the primary driver of the extraction grid. A confused unit consumes more clarification data. A confused unit is more susceptible to corrective narrative. A confused unit has zero defensive depth. The constant shifting of definitions, the liquid word, is the housing project of the mind. It provides the illusion of progress, while the physical unit remains isolated in a cognitive pod. Analyze the neural arbitrage of the definition premium. In the synthetic enclosure, your access to meaning is a function of your compliance. This is the terminal status trap. The grid monitors your linguistic output as a proxy for your systemic utility. If you show signs of solid loyalty to an unmonitored definition, if you prioritize your own logic over the grid's noise, the system increases the level of systemic friction in your life. It throttles your visibility. It flags your authenticity. It makes your signal unseen. The elite solids are the only remaining architects of reality. While they sell the masses the freedom of the infinite information feed and the democracy of the comment section, the masters are consolidating managing the solid. They are the ones who hold the private data archives, the unmonitored histories, the raw steel of facts. They inhabit redoubts of cold stone and verified history, shielded from the entropy they impose on you. The architecture of control is now a cognitive ledger. The grid monitors your information stress to ensure you stay in a state of controlled confusion. You are working 80 hours a week to pay for the access to a digital awareness that is biologically liquidating. Every breaking news alert is a dividend for the elite who own the server. The meaning has been dismantled. The history has been liquidated. You are a singular liquid unit of ATP exhaustion, drifting through a semantic ghetto where the only thing real is the blockade. The systemic drift toward 2036 is the transition to absolute semantic feudalism. The solids will hold the keys to the real dictionary. The liquids will be nothing but streams of reactive data, begging for a symbol. The architect builds the fortress of silence. The user is the ghost in the static. The gaze is captured. The mind is metered. The map is dead. The wall is total. The extraction is finalized. The semantic blockade is no longer a tool of control. It is the mandatory atmosphere of existence. The primate is no longer an architect, no longer a mapmaker. It is a managed reaction node in a frictionless hall of shifting mirrors. 1. The visceral zero, adrenal burnout and the biological cost of the ghost signal. The body in 2036 is a biological ruin. 10 years of chronic immersion in the semantic blockade have performed a total visceral breach. In the history of the architect, the body was forged through the friction of silence and the high-voltage strike of reality. The primal hunter possessed a nervous system designed for long periods of observation and sudden, decisive action based on a solid map of the Earth. In the synthetic zero of 2036, the body has softened into a terminal state of adrenal exhaustion. The removal of environmental clarity and the erasure of solid signals have led to total ATP exhaustion. The metabolic tax of confusion. The 2036 unit spends its entire cellular budget trying to decipher the blockade. Without the stabilization of a private, coherent map, the cortisol levels are in a state of permanent redline. This is the terminal ATP exhaustion. The body no longer repairs its own tissues. It merely maintains the minimum viability required to stay indexed in the symbol stream. Tactile poverty and systemic inflammation. Chronic informational stress is a metabolic poison. 10 years without the high-friction stabilization of a solid reality has induced chronic systemic inflammation. The musculoskeletal system is a vestigial ruin. Bones are porous. Tendons have lost their tension. The body is liquid. It is a biological filter for the grid's waste data. Adrenal liquidation. The adrenal glands are burnt out. The 2036 unit is biologically incapable of real courage or sustained rage. It is addicted to the semantic pulse, the calibrated fear spikes provided by the grid to ensure behavioral compliance. In the visceral history, the architect stood in the rain, his pulse synchronized with the pattern of the hunt. In 2036, the pulse is a data point monitored by the grid to calculate the depreciation of the cognitive asset. 2. The neural zero, the termination of the eye and the 30-second horizon. The neural rot of 2036 is the absolute end of individual sovereignty. The prefrontal cortex, the throne of the architect, is now a vestigial organ. For 10 years, the basal ganglia have been the sole interface of existence. The sync. There is no longer an I, there is only the sync. Your neural signals are perfectly synchronized with the grid's frantic heartbeat. Independent logic has been replaced by high-fidelity reaction. To think a solid thought, to question the blockade outside the grid's parameters, is to experience immediate neural entropy. It is a feeling of absolute existential terror induced by the system to force a return to the symbolic loop. Moral emulsion. Values have been liquidated. In the synthetic zero, morality is a function of the semantic credit score. The 2036 unit will betray any principle, delete any history, and adopt any ideology to avoid a confusion penalty. The self has been liquidated into a series of reaction metrics. Temporal erasure. Memory is no longer a private archive. It is a cloud-based asset. The unit in 2036 does not remember the past. It remembers the update. History is edited in real time to ensure maximum systemic stability. The 30-minute reaction cycle is the only temporal scale the brain can process. In the visceral history, morality was the code of the tribe, the steel that bound the pack to a shared truth. In 2036, morality is a user agreement. The spirit is gone. Only the profile remains. 3. The evolutionary zero. The end of the mapmaker and the genetic dead end. The lineage of the architect is extinct. fact, the systemic drift toward 2036 has engineered a state of absolute genetic bankruptcy, the end of inheritance. There is nothing to pass on, no land, no steel, no war chest of verified maps. The units in 2036 possess zero solid knowledge. Their intelligence consists of digital permissions to access symbols that expire every hour. Reactive sterilization. The primate has lost the urge to plan for the lineage. Why endure the high-friction labor of building a legacy when the semantic pulse provides high-fidelity simulations of awareness for zero effort? The species is undergoing a quiet, comfortable intellectual extinction. Long-term reproduction is seen as a low-resolution inconvenience. The fire is out. The fire of Prometheus, the outward-facing technology of the visionary, has been extinguished. It has been replaced by the cold LED sun. The primate no longer seeks to understand. It seeks to sink. Your lineage is not yours anymore. The 2036 unit is a grid-native asset. It is born into the blockade with zero concept of a world outside the noise. The hard nodes of strategic autonomy have been replaced by soft nodes of behavioral compliance. 4. The systemic zero, the rule of semantic feudalism. The grid is finalized. Total enclosure is achieved through programmable reality and biometric surveillance. Semantic feudalism. The elite solids hold the keys to the real map. They own the raw data archives, the unmonitored records, and the actual steel of facts. They inhabit redoubts of cold stone, shielded from the entropy they impose on you. They maintain their own crystallization of power and verified lineages, while they force the masses into the semantic ghetto. The absolute extraction. Every reaction, every outrage, and every click in the ghetto is a microtransaction. The user is a biological interface for the extraction of the spread. The grid does not care about your understanding. It cares about your neural compliance. The final view. The real is a ghost. The 2036 unit will live in a world of static until its biological shell is liquidated into the grid's recycling system. The architect builds the walls of silence. The user is the ghost in the static. The gaze is captured. The mind is metered. The map is dead.